We are here at the Circuit of the Americas. Qualifying has just got itself finished. We're getting set. It's round 19 of the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. And what a qualifying we've just had. Jacob Reed has put the car on pole by half a second. It's Jake Sperry and Taylor Mills bring you all of the action as we're getting ourselves ready for the racing start. As we get ourselves set. Emil Bernstorff back for the first time in a long time. He's all alongside on the front row. Eduardo Radice, the championship leader, goes from fourth. And we are getting set on what is an all-important start to racing here from this wonderful track. Engine notes are soon about to rise, and we are going to be getting ourselves in for what is 20 corners for 56 racing laps, and we are underway. And it's a great start from Eduardo Radice, who immediately looks to try and thread the gap. Emil Bernstorff's good through the second phase of acceleration on the brakes to Big Red. Turn number one they go. Taylor, a frantic start, but Emil Bernstorff leads this race.
Yeah, it certainly was. And after a very close qualifying, Eduardo Radice did find himself very out of position, but we know he likes to play it patient in these first phases of the race. So making that move up into third place, just behind Jacob Reed and Emil Bernstorff, is going to be exactly where he wants to be for the first phase of this one.
Yeah, and through the very tricky S's section, up the hill, and then looking for the attacking lines over towards turn number 11, because you've got that run all the way over towards turn number 12. And so a nice start then as they go through the field. One car in the pits then on the opening lap. That's Michael Weischerek, who finds himself in troubles. One car starting away from the back as Joseph Loke, who's found himself down the order after not setting a time in qualifying. But there's one car back there without a rear wing making its way along the circuit. So it looks like we've got different levels of drama out there to start. But a lovely start it has been for your top two. Eduardo Radice up to third and having to defend.
Yeah, plenty of drama here at COTA as it's full of pinch points from end to end of the lap. And oh, a huge spin through turn 13 and 14 even, that's collected a couple of cars. I'm trying to figure out exactly who that was. Was it? No, it wasn't Joseph Loke. What car livery is that? Kent Nielsen. No, it was Kent Nielsen who's ended up off the road. The Canadian going for a spin between turns 13 and 14 and potentially collecting another car in that. So as we said, COTA, it's got pinch points, and Kent Nielsen found himself in the middle of one.
Well, Kent was the driver with the missing rear wing as Jacob Reed dives back down the inside at the start of lap 2 and moves himself back to the front. The only driver who is out there who is not on a tyre that is needed to at the moment, I believe, is John Atkinson Jr., as pretty much everybody has started on a medium except for Joseph Loke, who is on a hard compound tyre. So that sets up the way that the racing's going. But Jacob Reed, it's taken him a lap, but he's now got himself back to the front of the field, knowing he's 78 points back in the championship. He needs to make ground, hand over fist every single race over Eduardo Radice with 6 races to go. Radice doing what he needs to, and Jacob Reed won here last year, Taylor, including the likes of those the years before with Eddie Papanta and Andreas Henkel, as James Byrne now lines up a move on George van Rensburg and can't get by the South African.
Yeah, COTA's a happy hunting ground for Jacob Reed, as it was a fantastic race he ran last season, as it is side by side for James Byrne and George van Rensburg as they come through that tricky final sector. They'll be single file as they make their way through the Istanbul turn 8 in reverse corner. But this is a critical race for Jacob Reed. He's very quickly running out of time to try and chase down Eduardo Radice's lead. And at the moment, he's in a spot to do it. But Radice, I'm sure, is going to be moving forward sometime soon.
Well, Eduardo Radice will know what he's capable of doing and how quickly he can run through a field and make himself a presence in this one. He knows that Emil Bernstorff on his day is a race-winning caliber driver and will be looking to prove that again here today at the Circuit of the Americas. We have not seen Emil Bernstorff in this season since Long Beach earlier on, and that was about 4 or 5 months ago. So it's been a long time since we've seen Emil Bernstorff out there and racing, and I think that's been quite telling, to say the least. But as they dance on to lap number 3, they'll be thinking about what they want to do with their strategy game moving on forward, knowing how critical the point situation is, knowing that this could be a championship that is won on the finest margins. We'll take a look from the rear of George van Rensburg, who looks at James Byrne, Alex Hagland, Mario Bodlosch and Volta Lux. So the 2 Austrians together in 7th and 8th, and they've got progress they want to start making.
Yeah, James Byrne then down the inside of turn 12 on George van Rensburg. It was a relatively easy pass as we are in the 3rd lap of the race, so DRS is active, and van Rensburg with no DRS on the car in front just punching a hole in the air for the entire train of cars behind him, as it's now James Byrne that is going to lead the way on that one. He's got 1.82 seconds to close in on Eduardo Rodis for 3rd place, but that is going to be quite the task when van Rensburg, Hagland and Bodlosch are all going to be vying for that 4th spot.
They all want to wade through, and they know this is a racetrack that builds the first sector with a heck of a lot of dirty air around it. Then the 2nd sector is where you can overtake, and the 3rd, if you can hold on, is great. Emil Bernstorff for the fastest lap of the race. He pulls the gap to within half a second and ditches Eduardo Rodis, stranded a little bit on his own. James Byrne now looking to wake up and show what he's capable of, and this middle pack now starting to form into 2 more, because Reynaldo Augusto for the final points with Dennis Branch and Gerard Borel and Florian Kammeyer. Kammeyer, didn't talk about him in qualifying. A shocker of a qualifying for him, down in 12th.
Yeah, it's a little bit unusual for Kammeyer. As you said, we usually see him up inside the top 5, but I think a couple of factors, including the fact we have such a competitive field in terms of 1-lap pace, maybe just not quite getting the lap together, finds Florian Kammeyer a little bit down the order. COTA, even after its art refresh that we saw this season, is notoriously tricky for getting a lap strung together on with all those curbs. Yeah,
Emil Bernstorff throws it in, and I think he's just going to get away with it here as he runs into turn 13 and 14. He gets the run, and so Emil Bernstorff and Jacob Reed are going to be trading about, even though we haven't seen Emil Bernstorff since Long Beach over the course of this season. He still has 4 podiums to his name, and he is trying to defend a top 10 place at the moment. He's 6th in the championship, ahead of George van Rensburg, by 2 championship points. So Emil Bernstorff now into the race lead, looking for his first win since the likes of VIR all the way back in 2024, I believe it was the last time that we saw a win of his caliber manage to find itself into play.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought Bernstorff, even though he had a great run off the start, after he got passed by Jacob Reed, sort of seemed to fall back a little bit. And I thought to myself, maybe this one's over already. Reed with that, well, much more experience under his belt this year compared to Emil Bernstorff, might have been able to pull away, but we do have a spinner.
Dennis Branch, who was in 10th place, going up into turn number 1, big red corner. He outbroke himself into the corner by the looks of it and had himself scarce on the outside, and I think he was maybe even wedged a little bit on the curb, so he was just about able to get away with those dramas out there, and he's managed to find himself with that places drop. So down to 20th for Dennis Branch, and a real hurt because he knew he did it all on his own.
Yeah, let's have a look at the replay and see exactly what happened then as Branch makes his way up towards turn 1. You can see the car harvesting as he pulls to the inside of the car in front of him and just gets it a little bit wrong under braking. These cars do have a braking system that moves the brake bias further towards the back of the car as you come off the brake pedal, and it is imperative you get that peel off right compared to where you are in the corner, because if it shifts the brake bias too rearwards too quickly, you are going to have a spin just like Branch had.
Yeah, and that's the last thing you want. We'll take a look here on the start. As the start came in, this was John Kelly trying to work himself through, just really bogged down through the first phase of acceleration and just had nowhere to go on that opening lap in terms of pace. So that meant that he was just going to take it nice and easy and try and prioritise the finish from the point that he did off of that start. This is Michael Weichereck's issue into turn number 1. So he finds himself in the middle, which is never good, 4 wide on the exit, and so he finds himself stuck in the sandwich.
Yeah, he doesn't. Look, he just pulls his way off the track. There's no point trying to continue with the amount of damage he had on his car. As we're going to see a replay of what happened to Nielsen. He did spot it, Sperry. There was a car with no rear wing making its way around the track, and it was the Canadian, who is known for some very aggressive defending. As he accidentally parks the car halfway across the track, and John Atkinson that gets caught up in that one, I think gets away without any damage, but he still finds himself all the way down in P22, a minute and 9 seconds off the race lead.
Well, John Atkinson, we know, did have to make that pit stop. We'll take another look here with Ken Nielsen missing the rear wing, so it's going to be absolutely out of any form of, I would say, rear downforce. And then, look, the back just steps around as quickly as that, and that's how it all falls apart and into troubles. But it's busy with Bodlosh. He is through on Alex Hagland, and Hagland throws it back at the arena, looking for the drive off the exit. Can't quite get there. Mario with the outside line, opens the steering, gets the drive, but Alex Hagland showing a bit of nerve and chip.
Yeah, he certainly was, and I think that was almost a move of desperation as Bodlosh so easily swung by. As here comes what looks having a look down the inside of the final corner, and he is actually going to get it done. I think just a bit of pressure showing for Alex Hagland there as he gets a little bit out of shape in that final sector. With the help of DRS, he'll have it go back into turn one, throwing it up the inside there as the track widens to open up that overtaking opportunity. And just like that, Hagland back up to P7, and Volta Lux is going to have to fight a little bit harder to make that one permanent.
Yeah, and Volta Lux, you look at where he is in the championship, he is currently going to lose his third place to James Byrne. He's ahead of Florian Kammeyer by only a couple points, but that will be a huge drop by comparison, and you don't want to be doing that at this stage of the season. Volta Lux, who has been very consistent, very good at finding these results, finds himself mired right now in the lower half of the top 10, and he hasn't been there for a long time. And I think that just shows to you, Taylor, just how strong the field has come on as of late.
Yeah, it certainly does. But one thing I'm just monitoring at the moment is how Eduardo Rodis has been left out to dry a little bit. He's got 1.3, 1.2 seconds to James Byrne, but finds himself 3.5 seconds off the tail end of Jacob Reed for P2. Now, it could be a bit of a strategy play. It does feel to me like Rodis is saving those medium compound tires for later on in the stint to try and make a little bit of a push back up to the rear of Jacob Reed and Emil Bernstoff, because we know what Reed's like with his tires. He likes to push them hard early and take the life out at the start of the stint, but it never really leaves him much left at the end. So we're only on lap 7 of this race. We've still got a long way to go here, and we'll find out how that strategy is going to pay off for Rodis as the race goes on.
Yeah, when we take a look at the tyre strategy, we're expecting 1 or 2 stops today, as we'll be running the C2 hard tyre, the C3 medium, and the C4 soft out there overall. We're expecting 20 to 22 seconds down on the lane. So if they're all starting on mediums, which all bar Joseph Loke is, and Loke could do 55 laps if he wanted to on a set of hards and move to a soft tyre, you're looking at the sort of day where it's about getting yourself to a magic number, which is anywhere between lap 30 and 36, as Hagland and Lux now give themselves options, and in towards turn number 11 they go, and Volta Lux gets himself the pass, but critically they hit the DRS marker board. They're both going to gain a bit, and Alex Hagland with the double toe moves to the left hand side, will dump the battery trying to get the pass back. Aggressive on the brakes, but it's again that outside line for Lux. He'll look to confirm the pass here at turn 13 and 14 as he enters the arena, and does so. So Hagland loses out, but the tyres, I think this is one stop written all over by the way this field has written it out today.
Yeah, it certainly looks like it on the mediums onto the softs, and that'll get you easily to the end of the race. But a great bit of car positioning from Volta Lux there to hold it around the outside of that big braking zone down into 12, to give himself the inside line for 13, and was just able to shuffle Hagland off the exit of the track a little bit. Gave him just enough room, I think enough where it was hard and fair racing. But as Hagland's been driving so far this race, he's not going to be happy with it. It's the run up to turn 1 yet again as he moves to the inside and squeezes Lux back over to the right hand side of the track. to try and apply a little bit of pressure. He's going to get that spot up into P7 yet again. And I think at this rate, Sperry looks is going to have to try something a little bit different to get that one.
Maybe something on the unorthodox side is going to be necessary out there. And speaking of necessary, you've got Gerard Burrell now up to 9th. He's through on Reynaldo Augusto, who's now back in 10th. And on the back of that is Florian Kammeyer in 11th place. And critically, Florian needs points, and he needs points like yesterday.
Yeah, he does. It might have to be something a little bit different on strategy for Kammeyer if he wants to move himself up into the top 10. With that massive DRS straight we've got, there are these little pockets of DRS trains that can start to form as all that dirty air in the first sector moves the cars apart, and then that back straight brings it back together, but not really close enough for any sort of overtaking to happen too often. We'll see how it works its way out over the course of the race, but Florian Kammeyer tries something a little bit different. Maybe the two-stop, could it work? We'll have to wait the long way to find out.
Well, we know that Florian Kammeyer is really good at technical circuits and struggles at those with a bit more high-speed nature to it, and this one is one on the high speed side of the coin. So it finds him down, fighting for a single point. Looks back through on Alex Hagland. That happened into turn number 12, the best place to get a pass done out there on track. But as we look on board with Florian Kammeyer here, just what makes this circuit tick, it's one of the few circuits, I think, that has a little bit of something that challenges every part of the car. It's got all the elevation change, it's got all the different corner profiles that you need, overtaking opportunities, it's got the lot.
Yeah, I think it's the corner profile thing that makes COTA, despite the fact it's often called derivative, quite unique. You've got the way the track widens and opens up down to the apex at turn 1, and then that cheeky little switchback at 15 and 16 that kind of reminds me of the final sector at Fuji where we were a couple of weeks ago, where the fastest line through the corner is to go wide and sweep it back in. But every time you do that, it leaves that inside line open to attack. One of the more popular overtaking spots at COTA is down here into turn 12. And that can throw up a lot of drama. We saw some incidents down there in the real life race last year, as Hagland is going to hope he doesn't do one of those as he slides past in the braking zone through on Volta Lux, and Lux is going to have absolutely no opportunity to fight that one back. Hagland will be in 7th for the final sector, but we might see the reverse of what Hagland has done on his competitor into turn 1 this time by.
Yeah, we definitely might have the opportunity for that to happen, as we have just lost ourselves cameras here for the moment, ladies and gentlemen, but at least for the moment we can go radio for a moment. So as those have changed, Emil Bernstorff still controls the race lead, but critically it's not much of a gap between himself and Jacob Reed, which is just half a second. Eduardo Radice is 1.6 clear of James Byrne in 3rd, 4th and 5th, with George van Rensburg on the back. And of course we've got a brand new starter here in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, the number 22 machine today, Taylor, of Christophe Mons, who is fighting in 13th with Paul O'Regan, Mr. Top 10.
And we know how competitive this field is. I'm trying to remember what the strength, 5.5K was the strength of field for this one. So for Christophe Mons on debut to be up there inside the top 13, it might not sound that impressive, but you've got to remember that he's out there boxing with the likes of Paul O'Regan, Reynaldo Augusto, Edward Apariari is up there as well, Florian Kammeyer only a couple of spots ahead, Joseph Loke only a couple of spots behind, as there has actually been a change of lead as Jacob Reed makes his way past Emil Bernstorff down at the end of that DRS straight, as we've seen so many times this race already, and Bernstorff will slot into position behind, and Reed will lead those two cars through that final sector, and maybe now can be his chance to start to pull away.
It was a traditional DRS overtaking pass down the back stretch and into turn number 12, which was the one that got it all done. So for Jacob Reed, he now retains his control at the front and knows that Eduardo Radice will be looking to try and hunt both him and Emil Bernstorff down the longer that this race goes on into its progress. Lap 12 just starting then in this one, and then you've got the likes of drivers a little bit further down like Edward Apariari in 14th and Lyle Pinar in 15th. Interesting stat about Lyle over the course of Lyle Pinar's career, Taylor, has had 5 DNFs and all of them have come this season.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say 5 DNFs just at COTA alone, but it's a track that could be quite attritional, as cars can very easily find slippery surfaces and massive sausage curbs to throw them off the road. I think, fortunately for Pino, it's not going to be the case today. He's still in this fight, only half a second off the back of Edward Apariari, but he's got a bit of a reputation that I'm sure he doesn't want to keep up, because 19 races into the season, having 5 DNFs isn't going to get you anywhere up the standings.
Well, Florian Kamai has moved himself into 10th through on Reynaldo Augusto now, so he'll have his eyes set on Gerard Borel and trying to get through. But speaking of which, there is still the front to try and navigate, and Jacob Reed and Emil Bernstorff working through the early to mid part now of their schedule. Alex Hagland in a race, not against Alex Hagland, but against Walter Lux, who is just behind him, 0.4 of a second is the margin that is sat with at this moment, desperately trying to pull as much as possible here, these two back to the other Austrian, Mario Bodlos. They took 0.6 of a second out of him on that last lap, and again, Kamai remaining close against Gerard Borel, who's been very good at picking a couple of tiny points up here and there.
Speaking of drivers on the move, though, Joseph Loke up in P7 after, up in P16 after that pit lane start, finds himself up 7 spots. There you go. That's where that came from. A little bit of chaos in the first few laps, helping him make up those positions. And as you said, Sperry, he's the only driver on that hard compound tire, which can get itself the majority of the way through this race. As it stands, he is 36 seconds off that race lead, so he's outside that pit window by about 15 seconds or so. But he could pull a bit of a blinder here and go aggressive on the softs at the end, because that tire life that we see is based on how you drive the tire. If you really look after it, you can get it those 30 or 40 laps or so. But if you really hammer it and push and get the pace out of it and set qualifying laps every time, of course you're going to get less life out of the tire, but you will be the fastest car on track, because everyone in front of Loke in that final stint is going to be saving their set of tires, but he could be on for a strategy to go full push in the final 10 or 15 laps.
Mind you, while you say that, he did the most traditional sim racer thing ever that you've probably seen, as there goes Florian Kamai down the inside of Gerard Borel. That's 9th now for Florian and 2 Sim Speed Championship points. Joseph Loke did do the most sim racer thing ever, Taylor, and asked how much fuel.
We've all been there, haven't we? It's every time you sat on the grid for a race like this, someone is always either going to ask, oh, how much fuel do I put in? How much to refuel at the stop? Just get out a spreadsheet, set up a little thing that does the maths for you and figure it out. Thankfully, people were kind enough to tell him how much fuel he needed to put in, but that might not quite have been in time. Or maybe it was a strategy call to start from the pits, because we did see that chaos on lap 1.
Yeah, and for Joseph Loke, case of making sure his fuel numbers were correct before he went out and started making something happen, deciding from the back, how far can I launch up the order? He's dragging along with him another debutant, Philip Kuhnhardt, out there, as there goes the look from Christoph Mons, the other debutant, through on Paul O'Regan. So that a pass for 12th place then being done, and both debutants are both Germans.
Certainly one of the coincidences of all time. But talking of Germans, guess who we've got on track at separated by only 1 position? It's 5 or 6 seconds out there on the road. But as so often is the case, and has been the case in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour, Walter Lux and Florian Kamai finding themselves together in the standings. Usually we see them up inside that top 5, but with the way that George van Rensburg and James Byrne have improved their pace over the season, it's sort of shuffled these two almost outside championship contenders out of what is their normal 4th and 5th position. And they have a bit of a fight on their hands if they want to keep a hold of their spots in the overall standings, that you can see there live updated as James Byrne looking to jump both Walter Lux and Florian Kamai. Well, Lux staying where he is, but swapping spots with Kamai, which I think is the more interesting part of that.
And that is if they stay as they are. If Lux and Kammeyer swap places, then Lux falls behind Florian Kammeyer out there. And if Florian Kammeyer can gain 2 places out there and get by Alex Hagland, then he'll move back ahead of James Byrne in the championship. James, of course, on home soil for this one here in the Lone Star State of Texas, so he'll be certainly hoping that he can get into fine form, and he's had good runs over in American tracks over the course of this season. James had himself, of course, some wonderful running over in Sebring, where he finished off the race. Well, he didn't quite get the finish he wanted at Sebring, but he was certainly looking around and saying, what more could I do over the course of this season? He's had a wonderful run of second places, the Nürburgring, Barcelona, Hungaroring, Aragon, Fuji, and of course his first ever win at Monza. This has been a great season for him, but he's still being shadowed by George van Rensburg, who has been lightning over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, Byrne's turn of pace over the course of the season has been absolutely spectacular to watch, especially as it accumulated in that win at Monza only a few rounds ago. And he's turning that into consistent top 5 results. And that just goes to show what you can do if you just set your mind to something, because Byrne came into this championship with the mindset of, I'm going to come in, I'm going to improve, and I'm going to do better. And that's exactly what he's done. He's learned the hybrid, he's learned how to manage the tires, and he's taken everything he's learned, put it together, got that race win, and again finds himself in front of so many drivers that we expected to be inside that top 10.
Joseph Loke diving down the inside of Lyle Pienaar. That's a move for 15th place, and Lyle very graciously allowing that one to happen. And you can take 2 different lines there at turn 16. It's one of the great corners, and actually into the pits will come Edward Apari-Ari after just 15 laps worth of racing. So that is a very early pit stop here, and I wonder whether that will be a throw onto a hard tyre to drive to the end of the race. If that is the case, that is a huge decision, but Edward Apari-Ari comes out on a soft, so this is a 2-stop at least.
Well, how many times have we seen Apari-Ari pit on the 1-stop strategy when the race has been a 2-stop? He seems to be doing the opposite here today as he drops to 21st position on the road. He's going to have a few seconds of clean air with John Kelly at 3 seconds in front of him. A slightly slow stop, I think, compared to what we normally see, but a fresh set of those red striped soft compound tires to throw his way through the Silverstone inspired S's here at COTA and try and extract every ounce of pace out of that car for, well, the next hour or so.
Well, it's all that he can do is try something out of the box to make it happen, as again Reagan and Mons continue on their battle at the moment. This is for 12th position on track. They've got a long way, about 9 seconds over to Reinaldo Augusto, so at the moment they're very happy with their own battle that they've got, and only a few seconds back of them is the charging Joseph Loke, who could be joining that as Mario Bodlosh comes into the pits. Reinaldo Augusto will join, so we do, with the track temperatures here today, have a difference between 1 and 2 stops. It's a 38-degree track temp.
Well, let's see which one shakes out to be the best as Bodlosh makes his way off pit road. Another driver opting to switch onto that soft compound tyre. Here comes Christoph Mons and Paul O'Regan just behind as they make their way through turn 1. Bodlosh is already on his way down the hill. You can see him just going through turn 2 there as these two almost exit in the corner side by side. But O'Regan's going to make the choice to slot back in and stay behind for now. Even though he's just been overtaken by Mons, this maybe feels like a bit of a when, not if, in terms of O'Regan getting back past.
Well, Paul O'Regan is a very wily character as John Pat Kelly jumps into the pits. Fantastic driver in terms of this series. He is the epitome of what this series is, JPK, out there when he's racing. But Paul O'Regan, I think, has a lot of experience. Remember, he's only ever had 1 retirement in the Grand Prix World Tour, has Paul, and that's come this season, so he knows how to place a car, and the only time he didn't was on a lap 1 wreck. So for the moment, he'll take the slipstream, the DRS, the comfortable pass down the inside, the position up into 12th position once more, and knowing that Joseph Loke is about to join them.
it always throws me through a bit of a loop seeing how much space these drivers give each other, because I guarantee you if this was an IMSA series race, those cars would be side by side, door to door, all the way through the braking zone. But because of the nature of the aerodynamics on these cars, there is absolutely no way you can risk taking even the slightest knock to the front wing or the side pod or the floor of these cars, because you're just going to lose so much of the downforce these things create. And that's reflected with how these guys race each other. And it is, for the most part, very respectful. And it's always impressive.
Volta Lux then exits the pits and will join on a set of soft tyres. He's on the same strategy as his compatriot Mario Bodlosh, so he'll be doing his best to try and hunt him down over the course of this. He is, by his day job, Volta, an engineer over at AVL Race Tech. So he's certainly got a huge amount of experience he goes to. But the data scientist from Worcestershire, Jacob Reed, is holding his station and doing so wonderfully here with Emil Bernstorff, a former driver in the likes of F4 and upwards in terms of category, has certainly got his eyes on hunt mode at the moment, because it's a case of the best iRating in the field at 9,200 for Emil Bernstorff against Jacob Reed, the two-time champion of the World Tour.
Yeah, about a third of the way through this race as it stands, already seeing some cars make their way down pit lane for those first pit stops. It's a bit of a question as to what strategy your race leaders are on, as it looks like a one-stop as it stands, and I think we're seeing that reflected in the way they're driving.
Eduardo Radice hits the pits from third position, so he only goes 19 laps on his stint, decides he's going to want a bit of clean air. He'll be followed in by Florian Kammeyer, and so the strategy comes into play. Soft tyres then for Eduardo, as he will look to drive out of the pits here and charge up. 25 seconds in the lane it took him for transit, as he now works himself through turn number one. He has got a bucket of clean air, exactly what he wants.
Yeah, exactly, Sperry. I really like this call from your championship leader, as he finds himself 7 seconds off the back of Jared Burrell, who is bound to come down pit lane anytime soon. Radice had found himself in a bit of a bubble, a bit of clean air all around him. No one to fight in front and no one to catch him behind, as just finding himself in that empty space, no way to move forward. He's had to think to himself, right, what can I do differently here to try and get myself back in the hunt for that race win? And what he's done is he's pitted early, bolted on a fresh set of softs, and now he's going to follow the example of Apariari and Mario Bodlosh and Volta Lux of going quick in the middle stint, closing down that gap and really going to work on that final set of tyres. It's a really good strategy call.
Well, you got about 20 laps worth of life before you push towards the end, and here comes the pass down the inside as Florian Kammeyer makes quick work there of Paul O'Regan and Christoph Montz, and needed to in order to stay with the likes of those in front. He's dropped ground to Lux. He's got Joseph Loke in front of him. Alex Hagland now makes the call to jump down into the pit. So Hagland will be looking at the best way he can get his first pit stop out of the way. Lap 20, he decides to make that call and say that's the best time for it. A little slower way with a 3.9 second stop as we focus on Kammeyer. This will be interesting to see where Alex Hagland comes out, because he'll come out behind Mario Bodlosh and he will be very close still there, as you can see the massive American flag there as we work through the opening corner of Volta Lux, who will stay right with him.
Yeah, just keeping an eye on this fight between Bodlosh and Hagland, though, because thanks to Florian Kammeyer, we saw how racy those softs can be on their outlap, but I don't think there's enough distance between Bodlosh and Hagland right now for Bodlosh to be safe from the driver of the number 13 car behind. But for Hagland, he's going to have Volta Lux for company, as they're almost going to be side by side coming down into turn 11, and it'll be the run down the straight where Hagland's going to need to hold on, as he's a little bit wide compared to the Austrian behind, as the DRS, they'll fly past the DRS board, and that rear flap will open, and Volta Lux will slide on by the Swede as if he is stood still, moves back over to the racing line and snatches that 8th position. It's going to be another few corners for Alex Hagland before those tyres are properly up to temperature, but give it a run into turn 1 and I think he might go on the attack again.
And now the strategy splits because in comes the #1 rated driver, Emil Bernstorff. He had just dropped outside of 1 second, Taylor, coming into the pit through that penultimate corner. So, bit a bullet and changed his strategy.
Yeah, Jacob Reed making great use of those tyres right at the end of their life. So Bernstorff coming into pit lane because he needs that faster rubber to get himself back on the rear end of Jacob Reed, as Eduardo Rodis sets the fastest lap of the session, a 1 minute 38.454, and that's the sort of pace we need to see from your championship leader if he wants a shot at this race win. As it stands, he's still about, I want to say 8 seconds off the back of Emil Bernstorff, so he's got a lot of work to do if he wants to make that work. And yeah, it's an unusual spot to see Rodis in, Sperry. I'm a little bit speechless.
Well, Eduardo Rodis had himself such a wonderful run in the middle of this season. He started well with 4 wins out of his first 5 races. He had 6 straight podiums to start and then had a run from Montreal to Aragon of 5 wins and 3 third-place finishes. He's only had a little wobble at Fuji, Barcelona and at Imola where he came together with Jacob Reed. So it's going to be a case of Eduardo Rodis doesn't make many mistakes, but when he doesn't find victory, he often finds a podium, and that makes him so tough to beat over a full season, because on his best day he's still scoring great as Renato Augusto with tyres compared to Philip Koonhart, who doesn't. We see the pass.
Well, we've got James Byrne and George Van Rensburg going long on this first stint, which could play a factor into the bottom step of that podium fight. We'll see how it shakes out for them, as Rodis is now finding himself still with that clean air to really extend that pace as he sets another fastest lap, this time a 38.287, as some question marks do start to come up in terms of how the strategy is going to shake out over the next, the next 20 odd laps or so, as we've seen Reed and Byrne go long before, especially compared to, Rodis in Monza, and now compared to Bernstorff here in COTA. Will that overcut work out again? Having that tyre offset can be so powerful towards the end of the stint, and it's going to be a question of can Byrne take advantage of that once more?
Well, they know that compared to Jacob Reed, they can't do much about it, but they are thinking about Eduardo Rodis here in the podium, and even Emil Bernstorff, who is currently 8 seconds behind him at the moment, and whether they can do anything to hold him up. Volta Lux and Alex Hagland continue to remain close as they work on lap 22, dancing along this back stretch towards turn 12, the prime place to get it done, and the runoff area, of course, has the Texas flag on it then at the Lone Star State, part of the art update that you see so often here at Circuit of the Americas, because of the fact that this is one of these brilliant circuits that each and every single time getting a lot of love now from NASCAR, which I quite like to see.
Yeah, thank Dale for the NASCAR 25 game coming from iRacing, as it's brought a lot of art updates to a lot of older ovals and a couple of road courses that needed a little bit of love, and COTA was certainly one of them, as now, of course, we have those big flags flying at the track as Rodis sets another fastest lap of the race. Just to keep touching on that strategy, as we've been doing all race long so far, I think as it stands, just looking at the gap and the pace of Bernstorff compared to Jacob Reed, when the Brit does come into pit in the next few laps or so, he will have lost the lead to Emil Bernstorff. It is mighty close in terms of what that gap is going to be, but this undercut has worked out brilliantly to get Bernstorff into clean air. But again, with that tyre offset that we've seen Reed take advantage of, is it going to hold up, or is he going to bolt on a different set of tyres and go a little bit longer?
I make this argument here, if Jacob Reed can push this out for another 12 to 13 laps, he's in the right place, and that is Philip Koonhart, who is slow coming down through turn number 1. He's found himself a spin all on his own on the exit, and it's right at the final phase. It was in the final gear shift that you go, I don't have to worry anymore about it, and the rears just lose it, the torque that goes through the gear shifts.
Yeah, 1,000 horsepower going to the rear tires of these cars every time you put your foot all the way to the floor. And it's such an awkward spot to have a spin in as well, as he practically nosed it into the barrier. Fortunately, gets away without any damage, rejoins the race cleanly, but has lost a lot of time from that. Now down in 19th, 4 seconds in front of Branch, and 5.5 behind Apariari, who's already stopped. And Kernhardt still on those first set of tyres.
Joseph Loke now having to play defense then, as he will look around at Florian Kammeier trying to wrest his way back into the top 10. Loke, having not made a stop yet, is up 13 spots in this race. He is the lap record holder at Oulton Park in the real world, and he will look around and say, I have a lot of real world experience too, just my issue is I couldn't put a qualifying lap down.
Yeah, and like we said, it's a tricky thing to do, but now he's coming up under all sorts of pressure from Florian Kammeier, who has made his first stop already on a relatively sharp set of those soft tyres. This is all under the rear wing of Loke, as it's a wiggle coming out that first sector for Loke as they make their way down the hill towards turn 11. Kammeier is going to close up under braking and might be going a little bit deep there, but focusing up the exit, he will have the advantage of DRS as they come down to that favourite overtaking spot of the race so far. The DRS flap will open and the gap will close. Kammeier pulls out to the left-hand side of Loke, down the inside on the brakes for P11 in this race. Sorry, for P10 in this race. Kammeier making a great move on Loke. But again, remember that tyre offset. He's got himself in that clean air, but a great use of those fresher tyres.
Yeah, wonderful use of it. And at turn 1 on this lap that we just had, Gerard Borel lost the place to Eduardo Radice. So Radice is hunting down, and he's got no gap between him now and Emil Bernstorff. That gap is down to 6.8 seconds out there on track, and Eduardo just has to race hard and race aggressively out there to get to where he wants to out in terms of this result. The gap now is Paul O'Regan dropping down the order. He's now diving into the pits.
He certainly is, and I think that is another car that's coming in for its first stop. Yes, it is. Mr. Top 10 will make his way down pit lane on that speed limiter into his box and up on the jacks for a fresh set of tyres. Trying to see which compounded tyre it is, because nice camera angle, not giving me the best view. So, Paul O'Regan onto a fresh set of softs. What's he going to do with this? A big, hard push in the middle, or could he stretch these out to the end? I think that's a little bit optimistic, but you never know with the life of these tyres.
And look at where he comes out, just in front of Philip Kernhardt and Dennis Branch. So he's going to have to get on the noisy pedal immediately. Jason Green as well in with his pit stop. Tough for Jason Green this season. He has had points in this championship before, but he's got the most starts this season without a championship point.
Yeah, Green just hasn't really been able to find the pace all season long as he finds himself down in P20 as it stands. Speaking of stands, he certainly stands out on the track with that bright green and black car, almost Sauber-inspired livery, but it just hasn't really been his season, even on home soil, just not able to find those 0.3 of a second that the home advantage usually gives you. And bless his heart, he's still out here, he's still turning laps, he's still pushing and trying to get a result out of it, and we wouldn't have these 24-car fields without some cars down outside the points.
Very true. His livery certainly does have a kick to it, if you know what I mean. But at least right now, you look around at George Van Rensburg and James Byrne. They're keeping the pace up quite well. Low 140s, high 139s they're managing. Jacob Reed's in the low 39s. And Emil Bernstorff did a mid-38 on that last lap, a low 38 from Eduardo Radice. So they are definitely being caught. It's just a question of by how much and when their strategy opens up, because I would argue that if they can hold out 5 laps, they're in a one-stop window.
Yeah, that's when it starts to get a little bit interesting, because the life they're going to give themselves at the end of the stint and the life that the cars that have pitted already are going to have taken out of the tyres should bring all of that time lost back to them, and possibly then some. It's one of the difficult things about this track, about these track temperatures, is without turning laps and laps and laps and laps of practice in these exact conditions, you can never be truly sure as to how the pace is going to drop off over the course of the race. And I think the interesting thing about the way these tyres are driven by these drivers at this track is they won't be on the edge of grip every single lap, because you have to find the balance between absolute pace and how far you can actually take the tyres. Because, of course, when you come down pit lane to change the tyres, you do lose about 20 or so seconds of lap time. And it's finding that trade-off between the 20 seconds lost in pit lane and about 20 or so seconds lost out on track. Will those 20 seconds be lost by the cars that have already pitted, as Philip Kernhardt side by side with Dennis Branch for P18?
And Branch gets the pass done. So that a good move as Philip Kernhardt watches on. Paul O'Regan already has dispatched the group. So that a very good move from Dennis Branch on his recovery now. And that puts him into what is 18th place with that overtake, and a good one at that too. So as we're just about looming over towards halfway in this race, it is about to get busy for second, for third and for fourth, because there is James Byrne, George van Rensburg and Emil Bernstorff. And remember that George and Emil have a 2-point difference in the championship. If it were to finish like this, George van Rensburg would jump ahead of Emil Bernstorff in the championship by 1.
Yeah, but let's be realistic. It's not quite going to happen like that, as George van Rensburg still needs to come down pit lane and fit, probably at this rate, a set of soft compound tyres. As almost as I said it, van Rensburg does make his way down pit lane for what should be his first and only stop of this race. We are at that halfway point, as you said, Sperry. So it's got to be a set of the softs. It has to be.
That's a 50-50 strategy, and I wasn't quite expecting that from George van Rensburg. So he'll be certainly looking to be uber aggressive. He's gone on to a soft compound tyre, and he's going to come out behind, well behind Alex Hagland here, and will be ahead of Florian Kameyer. So George van Rensburg up to speed, and now trying to work on a one-stop strategy, you'd feel, but maybe it's slightly early for that call for George. So he is going to be hurting on tyres late, but he might be banking on the fact that we're in sim time, just gone past about 8 minutes past 3. So that's certainly going to play a factor, as here comes Emil Bernstorff. This should be a pretty routine overtake, as Lyle Pienaar, the other South African, follows in suit on strategy, as Emil Bernstorff gets the pass done on James Byrne and promotes himself back to second place.
Yeah, very aggressive move from Bernstorff to sweep back in front of the nose of Byrne into the braking zone like that. We know how these cars like to concertina up under braking. So Bernstorff taking a bit of a risk there. But one thing I just want to touch on about van Rensburg's pit stop there is I don't really like how he exited the pit box in terms of getting those tyres up to temperature. These cars are on a slightly older tyre model than what we're used to seeing in a lot of the cars now. They don't really deal with any sort of slip or scrub as well as the new tyre models do. So with the amount of wheel spin that van Rensburg has had coming out of that pit box, his rears will have been absolutely on fire for that first sector. That rear end absolutely all over the place as he fought to keep it in check. And of course, doing that to the tyres at the start of the stint, it's not the sort of treatment that this red stripe rubber forgets. He will have to pay that back in the closing stages of this race. And I'm sure even now those tyres are still not going to be feeling that comfortable at the rear.
Alex Hagland sets the fastest lap of the race at 1:37.8. Launches away from Volta Lux and over towards Mario Godlosh in his Austrian-bred sandwich right now with Swedish filling at this point in time. Van Rensburg on board, working through the wonderful left and right of the opening sector, climbing up the hill for turns 8 and 9, and then this very fast over the top of the brow, down the hill left of turn number 10, at least turn 11. Taylor, one thing I do want to talk about, as we've seen over the last few weeks, is the updates that have been done to the car in regards to the energy recovery system.
Yeah, I remember we touched on it last week at Fuji, but that race was so end-to-end packed with action that we didn't really have much of a chance to talk about it. But every time we do one of these races, we do often talk about how our drivers have 3 different energy deployment modes to play with. They've got balanced, which will keep the battery nice and middle in around that 50% topped up range. You've got builds, so you can start to bring some of that energy back. And what that does, that stops deploying the hybrid energy sooner as Burn comes down pit lane. And means you lose that 170 horsepower kick from the electric motor. And it slows you down at the end of the straight. Or you can go into attack, where the car will just push that deployment all the way into the braking zone. And that's how we see a lot of those overtakes happen. However, now we have a button that they've had in real life for quite a long time on these hybrid power units, and we have the new recharge button. So how many times have you heard the Ferrari engineers saying to Charles Leclerc, recharge on, as Van Rensburg side by side with Byrne on pit exit? But we can do that in real life now. And you might be wondering, well, what does that do? Basically cuts all deployment and the car focuses purely on regeneration. The regen under braking goes all the way up. The regeneration from the turbocharger goes all the way up, and you lose pace on the straights for quite a while, but it gets that battery filled up at absolutely lightning pace and just gives you that chance to attack a lot sooner than you were able to before.
1 lap's worth of fresher tyres for George Van Rensburg, or even 2 laps, enough to get by James Byrne, and so he'll be looking to build on that. Philip Koenhart hits the pit, and I believe the only driver we're waiting for now is your race leader, who's just dived in. The 2-time champ is making his stop, Jacob Reed. This is the moment of his race that he now needs to be absolutely ruthless with.
Here it comes then. Jacob Reed is going to know exactly how much work he needs to do to get that race lead back, as Bernstorff will fly by just as Reed comes to a stop in his box. It is a fresh set of the red striped soft compound tires on for your defending champion as he will exit the pit lane. Well, not just 9 seconds behind Emil Bernstorff, but 1.5 seconds behind Eduardo Radice. So not only has he got to close the gap to your race leader, he has to fight his championship rival to do it.
Well, this is what blockbusters are all about. Mario Bodlosh is in for his 2nd stop of the race, and he's out and away again. So Jacob Reed now can hunt against his own nemesis in the championship, and he will know how critical his driving has been. Jacob Reed has been taking a lot of experience as he runs very wide, actually, through turn 10, as here comes Joseph Loke now, going to the outside of Christophe Mont to make the pass. Well, whatever gets your job done there, whatever floats your boat, Joe, as Christophe loses out the pass. But I've been looking at what Jacob Reed's been doing in the meanwhile between his races. He's had a lot of love in the GTP, the Nissan GTP, in the IMSA Vintage Series.
Oh, yeah, no, Jacob Reed absolutely loves his classic race cars. He was doing the Vintage Grand Prix Tour race at Mosport the other day as well. I don't think he did too well in that one, and I think he usually does a lot better in the IMSA Vintage Series, and certainly a lot better over here in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. But I think the one thing that we so often forget about these drivers is that they're not just virtual Formula One drivers. The freedom of iRacing and the iRacing platform gives us the opportunity, or gives them the opportunity, to go out and drive whatever you want, from modern Grand Prix high downforce monsters to old turbo ground effect boxes from the 1980s, all the way to modern endurance prototypes and GTs. But it just so happens that once a week they abandon all of that they're doing in the background, join us on a Formula One circuit, and absolutely go at it.
Alex Hagland is absolutely flying at the moment. He's just done a 1:37.7 out there, and that was 1.3 seconds quicker than Eduardo Radice on that last lap. So I look at Alex Hagland here. Hagland might be trying to drive himself to a podium, but he will burn his tyres really quickly if he continues at that pace.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth there, Sperry. Hagland is on comparably aged tyres to Eduardo Radice and Emil Bernstorff, and as you said, he's about 1.5 seconds faster than either of them as it stands. But it feels like those two are doing a bit more management of their pace to try and give themselves some life in the tyre at the end of the race, so that Jacob Reed so that they can hold off from Jacob Reed. It could open up that 2-stop, especially for Alex Hagland, who seems to just be taking the best out of the tyre now, as he's absolutely left Volta Lux in the dust.
Yeah, James Byrne back through on George van Rensburg. It wasn't going to take long, and he's managed to find that pass. So George then already looking around saying, well, my tyres are a little bit older, and already I'm going to have to go into management mode. Jacob Reed hunts down a fastest lap, a 37.2, and he pulls right up to the rear now of Eduardo Radice. And now this becomes the race of championship leader versus the reigning two-time champion. This is where these two will be looking around going different strategies, different calls to go with, and I would argue that Jacob Reed is a full pit stop ahead of Eduardo Radice compared on what they're both trying to do.
Yeah, let's see how it's going to work out for them. We know that tyres can be eked out a lot longer than often our graphics say, and Eduardo Radice is one of the kings of looking after his tyres. But it's very much in the Italian's best interest to try and fight Jacob Reed off as much as he can to hold on to that spot and hold on to that championship lead. But Jacob Reed is going to absolutely fly by on the straight and be 1 or 2 car lengths ahead before they even get to the apex of turn 12. And that fight is over just as soon as it's happened, as he finds himself a 6.5 seconds off the back of Emil Bernstorff and in loads of clean air. All he needs to do is close that gap, and this race win is there for the taking.
That is 17 clicks in a straight line, the difference there between Eduardo Radice and Jacob Reed. It was very much light and day between them, and I think it really did show the disparity that they have had to navigate through. It is 17 seconds there or thereabouts between Eduardo Radice and James Byrne, and I would keep an eye on that gap too, because remember, if Eduardo Radice wants this podium, he's got to get by James Byrne, George van Rensburg. He's got to deal with Volta Lux, he's got to deal with Alex Hagland if he decides to come in and make a stop, and I reckon he'll be about 6 laps away from that to get onto a very nice new set of red-walled soft tyres that will give him what he needs. And there is that gap, and James Byrne in this phase of the race will be hunting that gap down. He's dropped George van Rensburg, and he's trying to get to Volta Lux, who's 4 seconds down the road.
Yeah, his pace is relatively comparable to Jacob Reed, who's setting 37.0s at the moment. Byrne only 7 or so tenths behind that. As you can see, the pace advantage the American has got over Eduardo Radice, 7 tenths, 6 tenths, and 1.1 over the last 3 laps. As you said, Sperry, he's going to close in mucho rapido as we come towards the end of this stint. And again, I think that just highlights just how much hard work James Byrne is doing and how much pace he's found. As, yeah, again, he's still got the work to do, but it feels almost inevitable that 2-stop, it has to be the strategy call for Radice and Bernstorff at this point.
Yeah, I think they've made their bed, and they're going to have to lie in it, unfortunately, as we've seen Christoph Monks dive into the pits and make his pit stop to go onto a set of the soft compound tyres. So very much a case of everyone going for the same level of strategy here today. It's just a case of whether you're getting a 1-stop or a 2-stop for your money's worth on racing in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. Gap for the race lead down to 6 seconds out there at this point, and here is Lyle Pinar in a bit of a scrap right now. This is going to be with Jeffrey Lawler. Lawler, who has run 5 races in the Grand Prix Tour, has 3 9th place finishes, a 7th place finish, and then 1 non-finish. This could be, for Jeffrey Lawler, a tough day at the office on a home soil, and as he hits the brakes and comfortably gets the pass through up into 17th, it would be the first time, if this stays as it is, that Jeffrey Lawler does not score points for a finish.
Yeah, Lawler, of course, finding himself down pit lane after the first lap, taking a bit of damage repair and sort of having a bit of a recovery drive and damage limitation here today. But there wasn't really much Pinar could do for that one. The DRS flap was open on Lawler's car as he had that huge speed advantage down the back straight and was able to get in front of Pinar before they even hit the brakes. And even now, Lyle Pinar is losing time a little bit hand over fist in that dirty air as the gap just ekes itself out to 7 tenths of a second, which isn't enough for Pinar to lose the DRS, but I think it's enough for that dirty air to be very effective through the first sector.
Yeah, and there is Emil Bernstorff stuck behind Christoph Montz and would love a blue flag to go and get him by. But remember, they are advisory here in iRacing and not mandatory. They come from the IMSA school of how you deal with the flags rather than the formula school of what flags mean. So Emil Bernstorff gets the pass done, but at the cost of what? The gap down to 4.5 seconds here for Jacob Reed, who is absolutely hunting. In comes Volta Lux then to make his second and final stop of the race.
Yeah, 17 laps on the mediums, 17 laps on the softs as the Austrian makes his way down pit lane for what should be the final time. Up on the jacks and off them as quickly as he was raised up onto a fresh set of the softs, I should think. I can't see, but I think we can make a safe bet on that. He's going to find himself coming out on track in 9th place behind Mario Bodlosh, who's already made his second stop of the race. And now it is push time for Lux as Volta needs to work his way back through the field, wind that pace up nice and quickly, and extract every ounce of pace out of these softs for the next 20 laps.
Renato Augusto also follows in, but Volta Lux knows that he's got a championship to think about and 3rd place overall. His main rival will be James Byrne in terms of what he's dealing with over the course of the season, but James has been waking up to some really good results, and Volta Lux, the only thing missing from his resume, which is absolutely fantastic. He's 4th all-time in points scored, is Volta Lux. The only thing missing is a race win. That's the only thing he's not been able to get. In comes Emil.
And it's going to be tricky for him to do from 9th, as you said, though, Sperry. Emil Bernstorff coming down for his final stop. It certainly was a bit of a cascade that's been set off by Mario Bodlosh 5 laps or so ago. Reed getting that gap down to about 5 seconds before they came down pit lane, as Radice is going to join Bernstorff in this very wide COTA pit lane. Both will rejoin the track on a final set of soft tyres, but it's given Jacob Reed, let me have a look at this, a 17-18 second gap over Emil Bernstorff. That is a lot of work to do between now and the checkered flag.
Woof. That is a big margin now for Jacob Reed to play with, and he's not someone who gives it up easy. Emil Bernstorff is going to have to put the hammer down at a level which I don't think we've seen out there. We've got to talk about a second a lap almost from here, so he's got to be in the 36s basically between now and the end of the race to make it happen, and Emil has only just come out in front of James Byrne, so he's got that sorted for him. So he's cleared a very important cog in the machine in the form of James Byrne. He could have really held things up, and in fact he will, because James is going to come straight back down the inside. That was not the plan from Emil Bernstorff. He timed it perfectly to get the free clean air. What he didn't bank on was that, well, he's going to make his pass here as James.
Yeah, important thing to remember, James Byrne is fighting for this position. He is on that one-stop strategy with your race leader, Jacob Reed. So having Emil Bernstorff behind him is a spot as it stands. And this is the thing I was just thinking about, is there is an inherent danger with the two-stop strategy that Bernstorff and Radice have gone for, because they haven't really given themselves an offset compared to those drivers that are on the one-stop strategy. Because the car in front of Emil Bernstorff right now only stopped 8 laps ago. And 8 laps can be an age in terms of Formula One. But when you've got this few laps to go, in terms of raw pace, I think Bernstorff has absolutely got James Byrne nailed down. But this strategy has put him in the dirty air and put him in the position where he needs to do the pushing. The pressure is on Bernstorff. All James Byrne needs to do is drive the car as he's been doing it all race long.
Alex Hagland's come out, and he's not a million miles away from Florian Kammeier here, and Kammeier is within a second of Eduardo Radice. So Eduardo Radice better look behind, because Alex Hagland has done wonderfully over this middle stint to give himself an option to attack him at the end of the race. And the last thing you want is another driver on the same strategy as you picking up the places that you would want to. Radice in 5th place at the moment would currently be dropping the likes of 15 championship points over towards Jacob Reed. You can't afford to do that too often as Edward Apariari hits the box.
Oh, it's bad that, innit? A 15-point drop is not what Radice needs at this stage of the championship. He's got that huge lead over Jacob Reed, but if a race like this becomes almost the norm for the final few rounds of this championship, that gap is going to collapse quicker than it grew. It is so easy to build a championship lead in these cars, but it is even easier to let that drop. Radice down in 5th place. Jacob Reed currently leading. That 15-point swing could be absolutely paramount at the end of this season.
It could be absolutely everything. The 327 points of Eduardo Radice, the 248 points as in comes Florian Kammeyer to make his stop, and that sets Alex Hagland up with a direct chase of 3 seconds to hunt down at this point. 79 points could become 64 championship points with 5 rounds to go. That's still a lot. That's still over 2 race points margin. But again, you're seeing that gap shrink. It's psychological, as there's the side-by-side off the exit. Gerard Burrell getting himself a little bit caught up there with Florian Kammeyer. Now they're going to fight to the S's here, and Gerard's going to keep his foot in and take the place from the, I would say, limping around Florian Kammeyer on those cold tyres.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I think it was smart from Kammeyer to back out of that one and just let Burrell take the spot for now. And it's going to be a question of who's faster out of these two as the rest of the stint winds on, as Dennis Branch comes down pit lane for his final stop. But it's an element of patience for Florian Kammeyer. 9/10 of a second off the back of Burrell. He's going to have the advantage of DRS, as Emil Bernstorff has actually made his way past James Byrne at the end of that last sector.
It took him a while, though, and I think that's the scary prospect here. James Byrne, I think, with the 8 laps difference, is still legitimately fighting Emil Bernstorff here in this one. Jacob Reed, I think, has played an absolute strategic blinder here today compared to some of his rivals who have gone, I think it's a 2-stop, and realised that they've not got the offset to make it happen. James Byrne here is really fighting for that 3rd place in the championship in his rookie season.
Yeah, as it stands, I think Byrne is going to have to settle for 3rd for now. He's got Van Rensburg a few seconds off the back of him, but those two on a very similar strategy, and it'll end up being Radice that you might have to worry about at the end of this race. But these are all vital points for James Byrne to make his way up into 3rd, and that's where it's going to put him in the championship fight. But to have the pace to do the strategy and hold on the way he has been so impressive. But I think the one thing that I want to highlight for now is we saw Emil Bernstorff come out behind Jacob Reed by about 17.5 seconds or so. That gap now sits at 19. Byrne isn't Reed's teammate, but he's done an excellent job of making Bernstorff's uphill run even steeper.
It is one where you look at what James Byrne has done, and he will be bought a drink somewhere in one of the bars in Austin as we find ourselves then closer to the end of this race. Lap 41 soon to start with a 20-second margin at the front of this field. And now Gerard Burrell will look behind this for 1 championship point at the moment. Burrell versus Kammeyer. You can see there a lot of wing then for Gerard Burrell as he works along the straight. You'll see that from these drivers, that they won't necessarily go to the flat wing, that they'll give themselves a little bit of something to work with around the very difficult early sectors of the lap.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, Sperry. We touched on it earlier, how this track is a little bit derivative in terms of the actual layout, where that first sector is very reminiscent of Maggots, Beckett's and Chapel at Silverstone. And of course you have that triple apex right-hander that is a reverse of the famous Istanbul Turn 8. And it's really that first sector and that final sector that demand the high downforce package on each and every single one of these cars. Because yeah, if you drop it down to medium downforce, you're probably going to be 15, 20 kilometers an hour faster between turn 11 and turn 12, or turn 20 and turn 1. But how much speed are you sacrificing in the corners? Is it really worth the 3 or 4 tenths of a second that you're going to gain on those straights?
Well, that's the question that's always asked, and everybody has gone for, we quite like downforce, and so we're going to run with it when it comes through these corners. So it's very much a case of everyone knows where the time is won and lost in a race like this, and they know what they need to do to carry it. It does also mean, though, that you get a lot of dirty air through that opening sector, and you drop back by about 4 or 5 car lengths, and it becomes very tough then to go and gather the move over at turn 12. And Jacob Reed, by the way, is just styling with another 36.8 fastest lap out there. He is on the hunt for his 21st fastest lap in the Grand Prix World Tour.
There is a reason that that man is a 2-time iRacing Grand Prix champion, and he is putting that on show today. This is exactly the sort of race he has needed all season long, as he is just out at the front of the field on what he thinks is the optimum strategy, and he is playing the ultimate game manager. To compare it to NFL, you would call him a field general, as he's just doing his bit inside the pocket, getting the ball exactly where it needs to be and setting exactly the lap times he needs to keep that gap out, which, by the way, stands at 20 seconds. It's extended rather than closed.
I'd keep an eye on Eduardo Radice as well, because he is keeping the gap now to George Van Rensburg, and on that last lap he took almost a second out of him. I think George's tyres, with how early he's decided to go, are just starting to feel a little bit second hand. He's got Philip Koenhart in front of him, and as that battle for second and third is on screen and remains close for James Byrne, I think James here realises that I'm going to hold some cards close to my chest, and I'm not going to send everything out there. They've got Christoph Mons to put a lap down, but there is George Van Rensburg in 4th place, and that gap to Eduardo Radice, the championship leader, look at it, that's come down by 1.7 seconds over the last 3 laps.
Yeah, it certainly has, and I think, though, for Eduardo Radice, George Van Rensburg is going to be the last spot that he picks up in this race, as the gap between Van Rensburg and Byrne is all the way out at 8.5 seconds. And I've got to admit, once Emil Bernstorff got by Byrne for second, I did sort of write him off a little bit and say, yep, nope, this is where he's finishing, and I think he's going to fall back from Bernstorff. But I'll tell you what, even on 8 lap or so older tyres, he's done a great job to hang on to the rear wing of Bernstorff.
He has done, and James Byrne's been incredible. Another 7/10 then for Eduardo Radice, and a bit of lap traffic in the form of Philip Koenhart dispatched off by George Van Rensburg. And we talk about championship points, how Mario Bodlosh very much was going, I had contact lap 1 at Fuji and let the place back on the final lap, knowing that Eduardo Radice was behind me. Those extra 2 championship points in Eduardo's back pocket. He'll be looking at this pass on George Van Rensburg and go, that's an extra 2 points in my back pocket.
Yeah, and that's sort of what he needs to try and stem the bleeding a little bit. It hasn't been a good race from Eduardo Radice at all, which feels strange to say for a car finishing inside the top 5 of a race of this caliber. But it's certainly not the Eduardo Radice that we've seen all season long. I think if he was a couple more spots further up the order, this would feel a little bit more normal. But the Italian almost feels out of place. And he's going to make that spot up on George Van Rensburg. I think Van Rensburg is going to be a bit of a sitting duck, but it still gives him a little bit of extra work to do later on in the season to try and hold that gap. That was close.
What clearance there. That was tough for Jeffrey Lawler, who absolutely pinged it down the inside, got more than he bargained for off of Paul O'Regan, and then absolutely had to work for it heading in towards turn number 3. He got what he wanted, and now he'll look to run away from Mr. Top 10, who is now down in P14.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame to see him down this far, because he's been such a consistent top 10 finisher. But in terms of that move for Jeffrey Lawler, and speaking of pinging it down the inside, it almost feels like he had sonar coming off the back of his car to judge where to slot back in front as he switched focus back towards, I think, the front of the field, as we ride on board with Emil Bernstorff, who is still under pressure from James Byrne. And, well, back to Jeffrey Lawler we go. As actually, yeah, they do still appear to still be going at it, as Lawler fighting to hold on to that spot. O'Regan keeping that gap under a second and keeping himself in a window to fight back.
This is about management at the moment, and you'd say for Jeffrey Lawler, he's got the pass he wants. Now he can start building that gap, and he realises that he's got about 8 seconds to hunt down Reynaldo Augusto, and I don't think he's as quick. So Reynaldo, I think, will be looking at that 12th place going, I feel quite happy that I am safe in that regard out there. So this is going to be where you hold yourself to the litmus test out there at this moment and say, this is what I need to hold myself steady. And speaking of that, Taylor, you've been looking at James Byrne's tyres, and I think the patience that he's showing is absolutely wonderful.
There's no real indicator of tyre wear on iRacing until you come down pit lane. But just one thing I'm noticing is a bit of a behaviour from Byrne that we saw last time out in Fuji, where he's got the advantage of DRS coming down both the start finish and back straight. And where we'd expect to see other drivers go for ascent, what we're seeing instead is James Byrne having a big lift and coast into that braking zone. Now, most people would associate lift and coast with saving fuel and trying to go longer on a stint, but it has this sort of secondary feature of saving tyre as well, because if you lift into a braking zone, you end up going slower by the time you reach your normal braking zone, braking point even. So you can push that braking zone 10, 20, 30 meters further down the road and brake that much later. And not only are you braking for a shorter amount of time, you're also scrubbing off less speed. That's less energy going into the brakes, less heat going into the tyres, and less grip being used by the tyres. But even then, here comes James Byrne, DRS open, down the inside, no lift and coast this time, as he slots back into P2 in front of Emil Bernstorff. And I'm telling you, that move has been coming for some time, because Byrne has worked so hard to keep those 8-lap older tyres well within a window to take that spot back. He is showing he has the pace to fight with Bernstorff and fight with Reed, and that he deserved that race win in Monza.
Emil's not had a race win in over 2 years now at this point, call it 2.5. Here in the Grand Prix World Tour, and a great move by James Byrne puts himself back in second. And I wonder, how long is he going to wait, or is he going to try and dump some battery to get himself gone, and I would say far gone out there in terms of this track? That's going to be where you start asking the questions that are needed in this race for James Byrne, and whether he feels comfortable knowing he'll be moving up to third in the championship as things stand, unless Volta Lux has anything to say, because Lux has made the move through on Mario Bodlosh. That puts him now on 6 championship points he will pick up, but still nowhere near enough to get himself up and through on James Byrne, who's picking up 18 as it stands.
Yeah, he's still got a little bit of work to do if he wants to bring that one home, with 11 laps to go in this race, including this one. On the run down to 12, he's going to have the assistance of DRS from Edward Apariari and Jason Green in front, as it's going to leave him safe from Emil Bernstorff behind. And I think for Bernstorff, he's going to be scratching his head a little bit and sort of wondering where that pace went, as there was almost some door-to-door contact between James Byrne and the lap-down car of Jason Green, who dutifully gets out of the way on corner exit. But yeah, I think for Bernstorff, he's going to be scratching his head a little bit, wondering where this pace from Byrne has come from, and wondering where his lack of pace is, because I think him and everyone watching sort of expects Bernstorff to just be able to run off into the distance. But again, it just goes to show where James Byrne's at now and what he's done to keep these tyres in a window to hang on to that second place.
George van Rensburg now will hear the warning bells behind him as they sit with 10 laps to go as they cross the line. So Eduardo Radice has found his match in the form of GVR, but he knows that in terms of this race, Eduardo wants to get himself 2 extra SimSpeed Championship points, wants to do everything that he can to gain that place, to move on up and to say, look, this is as good as I could do today. This is my damage limitation. It won't be a podium, but what it will be is solid, consistent points with the margin that I have made. Running through now in towards turn numbers 8 and 9 and up over the top of the hill. So much more confidence from Eduardo Radice. He halves the gap.
Yeah, he's going to have a chance to get it done down into turn 12 as they thread their way through the hairpin at 11. Another corner that opens up very wide into the apex. That gap only 0.2 of a second as they exit the corner. Radice well within that 1 second DRS window. The rear flap will open, give him that 15 kilometers an hour top end speed advantage, as he will just glide by George van Rensburg and puts him down in 5th place. He goes a little bit deep into 12, but still hangs on to the spot, gets himself in front of Van Rensburg, and an extra 2 SimSpeed Championship points to his name.
So critically, that gap, which was looking like 15 points he was going to drop, suddenly becomes 13 points that he is dropping. That would mean he's going to walk into the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez for the first time ever in the iRacing Grand Prix World Tour with that margin there, 66 championship points.
And we have just seen a change of position for P9 between Florian Kammeyer and Joseph Loke, as Loke is all over the place right now. He gets a big slide on the exit of turn 16 and drops off the tail of Florian Kammeyer. The gap between those two was pretty large a couple of laps or so ago, and it sort of looked like Kammeyer was only bringing home 1 point today. But Loke's pace has just been a little bit nowhere. We'll see how that overtake happened. DRS again down that back straight. Loke will do nothing to defend. Actually, no, a bit of a Pruitt fade into the braking zone, and Kammeyer just makes it by as if Loke stood completely still. This is very out of character.
I think Joseph Loke's burnt his tyres up because he's down into the 39s. There's no one lap that indicates that he's not done anything or he's spun the car or anything like that. He's just sat down with troubles. And speaking of which, Emil Bernstorff has been just trying to do exactly what James Byrne did to him earlier on in this race, and it is the American versus the Dane who lives in the UK. Emil Bernstorff, he now sits and says, right, now it's my turn. Now I get to put the pressure back on you. I've seen you finish second so many times this season, but now you've got to prove it against me. Emil Bernstorff is a podium merchant when he decides that he wants it, and he can't get any drive off the exit of the final corner, the Andretti, and so that's going to completely temper the run to turn 1, but he'll have a go anyway. James Byrne gives him all the room in through the corner because he'll try and attack him back down the hill around the outside of turn number 2. Emil's got his line though.
Yeah, that was a really good move down the inside of turn 1 from Emil Bernstorff. He was so aggressive on the brakes into the final corner. You could see he chopped the gap of 3 car lengths pretty much down to nothing. And that's what gave him that pretty poor run off the exit of the corner. Is some of these corners on racetracks are all about how you get into it. But Bernstorff forcing the issue on entry, dragging that car through the exit of the corner and doing the same again here at turn 11, as the DRS is going to be in Byrne's favor this time, as that speed is going to build again and again and again, as this is where Byrne got by last time. Is he going to go for it again straight away? Yes, he is, down the inside of 12, and they will fight for that position on the brakes as Byrne going a little bit deep, and it allows Bernstorff to get back to the outside as they stay door to door through the double right-hander. Bernstorff almost had that inside line. He's still going to go into 16, snatches the apex from James Byrne, and he has to let that one go for now. What a battle.
Well, James Byrne wasn't going to let that go easy, and so he had to fight 3 different corners for it, and he's still going to hold on the back. Emil Bernstorff runs slightly wide there through turn 19. That opens up 20 now as a chance, but the question we'll be asking, will those 8-lap older tyres still hold? Will there be enough yet for James Byrne? He might come back at turn 1, you know, but thinks better of it as he walks himself over the top of Big Red and back down the hill again towards turns 2 and 3, and Emil Bernstorff now needs to try and work this from the front, realizing what he's got in this race and how much this will mean to these 2 drivers for 2 very different reasons.
Keep an eye on the body language of Emil Bernstorff's car, as he is so loose on corner exit through the really slow, really flat stuff. He managed to keep it in check up at turn 1, but coming out of this corner last lap, he was all over the place. Same again through the final corner, and that's what let James Byrne get all the way back up under the rear wing of that car and make that move. If he can't get those rears back under control, that P2 is going to remain under threat, as here comes James Byrne again, and he lifts off. Back to that strategy.
I wasn't expecting him to go for it. He was too far back this time to go sending down the inside without a care in the world. That was very much a case of, I know where my place is. We've got lap traffic coming up soon in the form of Lyle Pinar, the number 20, so they will have to try and get through that. Jacob Reed, by comparison, though, is going through turn 1, 25 seconds clear at the front of this field. It's been a demonstration of what a champion does.
Yeah, it certainly has been. The way he's controlled this race has been so impressive. Absolutely nailing that strategy to give himself the clean air at the front of the field exactly when he needed it. And I think he's had a bit of an assistance from James Byrne as well, who has kept Emil Bernstorff at bay for the majority of this final stint. And it's what's helped that gap extend so much, because when you're battling side by side, they've been doing it for 4 or 5 laps, it just reduces both cars' pace through the corner by so much. And you can see that reflected in that 24-25 second gap at the front of the field. So at this point, there is, well, unless Reed makes a mistake, knock on wood, there is absolutely no chance of Bernstorff taking that P1 spot. So he has to fight for second from James Byrne, who just somehow still has pace in those tyres.
Yeah, James Byrne, though, is starting to look a little bit languid back there at 0.7 of a second. I'd get a little bit concerned if I were someone out there looking to support him. He'll close that gap down to about 0.4 of a second, but by no means in a position to heavily lift out of it. Has a massive kick of oversteer trying to step down on the power, so he's got to try and find these lines that start working for him. I bet that traffic in front of Pinar and as well John Atkinson Jr. is going to be very important to the way that this is going to go for second.
Well, it'll help or hinder, as we've already touched on. Those blue flags are not instructional like they are in real life Formula One. The gap between these two will stay around that 0.6 of a second mark, as Byrne really drives it into turn 20 this time and really drives it off the corner as well. The gap will stay steady. DRS is open for both drivers, so Bernstorff will get that extra bit of defense into one this time, as he brakes actually quite early compared to Byrne, who looks like he had to check up a lot more on entry than he perhaps wanted to, as Pinar is going to move out of the way for both of them and let both of those lead lap cars go through, with John Atkinson Jr. only about 1.5 seconds in front of this fight.
And they dance through the S's section with those orange anti-cut curbs. They just stare at you through each and every single corner, meant to be the priority of do not hit them, because you will be in all sorts of trouble out there. 1 point still to be discussed between Gerard Burrell and Joseph Loke. You've got the likes of Volta Lux trying to hunt Alex Hagland, trying to hunt George Van Rensburg as well. But on the straight, a bit more DRS, and Emil Bernstorff here at risk of dropping James Byrne at the critical moment in this race. If he gets a second, it's disaster, and there's going to be no clearance through the corner here, and this is going to be really tough now for James Byrne. Look at the way that traffic plays its hand.
Even then, Bernstorff doesn't look comfortable in that cockpit at the moment, as that car just going deep in turn 12 and up at turn 13. But I think he's just about done enough to stay outside that window. We'll keep an eye on the gap as they come through the final 2 corners. That DRS detection point is just on entry to turn number 20. 9/10 is the gap, and it's going to stay around 9/10. It opened up as they both came through the final corner. And no, there isn't DRS available for James Byrne, so this could be it. If Bernstorff can run away in that first sector now, that is going to be the fight for second place well and truly over, as Gerard Burrell deep at 12 after just passing Joseph Loke only a couple of corners ago.
Yeah, Loke is right in the tank, and my tyres aren't playing the way I want them to. And Gerard, oh, there goes Joseph Loke. He goes sliding across then in the arena, and that will drop him even more time, but he knows he's got a large gap over Reynaldo Augusto. He is really struggling late here in terms of this race, but we do know how critical it will be to hold your pace, to hold your ground. We'll take a look at the pass here from Gerard Burrell, which meant all of the world, and then some. Look, he's even getting it right down on the straight. Look, they're pushing each other so close. That's almost the Alonso Stroll moment.
I was going to say, that reminded me a little bit of the World Endurance Championship last year, when Sebastian Buemi just pushed that Porsche into the wall on the left-hand side of the track. Fortunately, no damage for either of these cars, but Joseph Loke absolutely languishing on those tyres and finally decides that they've had enough. It's going to take a new set of softs that's going to get him home, but he will lose a spot to Ronaldo Augusto. And it won't be any points lost there, but it's certainly a touch of pride.
He might go for the fastest lap now in this position, and George van Rensburg is now going to be looking behind him, and he knows that it's Alex Hagland who wants to take that top 5 away. George van Rensburg knows that he's driven a great race, but Alex Hagland has been reeling him in, and this is where you pay back the Pied Piper. This is where the wish from the witch is going to start turning awry and a little bit sour. Get some help from EOA, Edward Apariari, to get the clearance needed. And now it's about the chase up the hill with 3 laps to go. Alex Hagland has caught.
Yeah, the difference in age of tyres between these two cars, you are looking at 10 laps, which if you want an offset, that's usually the number that you're going for because it keeps your pace strong right at the end of the stint. If you can have tyres that much younger than the car in front. Think that race in Barcelona in 2021. Paul Ricard, only a few rounds later, it is pretty much a repeat of that, except this time it's over P5 as Van Rensburg and Hagland fire their way down towards turn 11. The DRS will be active for Alex Hagland as they come onto that 1 and a bit kilometer long back straight. The flap will open as they go past the DRS board and the speed will build in the slipstream. The ERS deploying for both of these cars as they are giving it absolutely everything for that 5th place. George van Rensburg all the way to the inside, and he will have the preferred line through the corner. Both cars lock up. Hagland off wide, but has the inside line for turn 13, and they almost come together at the apex. So Rensburg sliding on exit opens the door for Hagland, and just like that, it is P5.
It's so tough. He didn't want to understeer as wide as he did, but he had no grip underneath him. And that's the move that Alex Hagland needed to jump himself up into the top 5 with not long left in this race. He's driven a sterling job from 8th on the grid to get up those 3 spots. And now we'll know he'll pick up some good points. And behind that as well, Edward Apariari. This is a scrap for 17th with Christophe Mons on debut.
Yeah, and these two have been going at it absolutely all race long. Christophe Mons has found himself in quite a few battles, and I do mean that as a compliment, as he cuts back beautifully on Apariari at the apex of 1, and there is nothing that the driver of that number 11 car can do to hold on to that spot. Some very heads-up driving from Christophe Mons there.
That's some wonderful driving, and we've seen wonderful driving time and again, but this has been the sort of day you sit down and say, can I get one more place here? And Volta Lux might be deciding, I want a couple more SimSpeed Championship points. He'd take 8 right now compared to the 15 that James Byrne is sat on at the moment if he can get this one through. So he'll be looking at this with a couple laps to go with a bit of green eye envy, seeing the pass that was done by the likes of Alex Hagland as the final lap starts for Jacob Reed. Volta Lux will not get an opportunity here this time into turn number 12, but will probably have to wait for the final lap of the race to go and get it done. He figures out his way through the arena, and now the triple right of 16, 17 and 18 out there on circuit, now looking for every line to make it happen. But of course, with Alex Hagland there in front, George van Rensburg is going to have every chance of fighting back through each and every single corner. Great run though from Lux. He's got all of the momentum that he needs now to maybe have a go at turn 1. Hagland moves to the middle of the road. George van Rensburg's going to cover and feign and have to half throw an attack, half throw a defense. He understeers through the corner. Thank you. It's Volta Lux who now moves himself up into 6th place. A very important pass at a very critical phase, and he still has eyes on getting 5th. But we have to go to your race leader right now, who's working his way through the arena. He's just had to let Joseph Loke go by and gain his lap back because he's right there with Ronaldo Augusto. Jacob Reed, who has walked away from absolutely everybody in this race, hasn't even needed to lift a finger. He was half a second clear in qualifying. He has waltzed his way to a race win, and in Texas, A win this big for Jacob Reed is just that much sweeter. He'll take it by a mile over the likes of those of Emil Bernstorff. Alex Hagland can't get his move back because that is Walter Lux absolutely ruthless on the final lap, moving up to 5th. Emil Bernstorff will take 2nd, James Byrne will languish to 3rd, and Eduardo Radice will see 13 more championship points whittled off the block.
Gotta say, I was keeping an eye on that fight for P5 and on that final lap, and Walter Lux absolutely nailing that run off turn 11, took P6 on the exit of turn 1, took P5 on the run down to 12, and did such a great job to hold on to it. But here's Joseph Loke with the DRS advantage on Ronaldo Augusto to get that 11th place spot back. He's gonna get it done with little to no effort, as there is nothing Augusto could do to get back by, apart from Joseph Loke going wide. But he's still gonna rejoin in front of Augusto and hold on to that spot. What a dramatic final lap here at COTA.
Joseph Loke with the major fresh tyres, needing that one done on the final lap. He'll get through. Also worth noting, Philip Kunhardt picked up the instant point limit on the penultimate corner, tried to serve it. He'll take an extra 40 seconds on the top, but Augusto's not giving this one up. Oh, hold on, Joseph. Hold on, Joseph. And now through the final corner as they go and fight for it. Oh, Ronaldo throws it in the wall, coming over the line. An uberly frustrated end for the Brazilian then as he crosses the line, but Joseph Loke will take that 11th place as they get things sorted. Let's run yourself through some official classified results after we take a look at this pass from Walter Lux. What an amazing move, Taylor, this is, to the outside, getting it done.
Yeah, I think Hagland felt like he had that 5th place absolutely nailed on, but Lux's decisive move down into turn 1 after Van Rensburg running wide, and then really taking full advantage of the DRS. And I guarantee you, absolutely dumping that battery on that final run down the back straight, outbraking Hagland on the right-hand side of the circuit into a left-hander and snatching 5th place right at the death of this race.
Career win number 25 for Jacob Reed as he gets it done by 22 seconds over Emil Bernstorff, who finishes off in 2nd. James Byrne will round out the final spot on the podium as Eduardo Radice will finish in 4th and will still keep a healthy margin, but it does become a little bit smaller heading over to the next rounds. Walter Lux will finish off in 5th, making 2 passes on the last lap ahead of Alex Hagland and George Van Rensburg, 6th and 7th. Mario Bodlosh will end up in 8th ahead of Florian Kammeier in 9th. And your final SimSpeed Championship point belongs in the back pocket of Gerard Burrell. Over the page, Joseph Loke on the last lap does everything he can to hold off Reynaldo Augusto, who frustratedly throws himself in the barrier over the line. Jeffrey Lawler would be your first driver a lap down ahead of Dennis Branch and Paul O'Regan. They're in 15th position. Lyle Pienaar and Edward Apariari would be 16th and 17th, with Christoph Montz then in 18th, letting Edward Apariari have the place back over the line, as Christoph Montz is 18th, Jason Green is 19th, and Philip Kunhardt, with the penalty, will drop down to 20th position overall for going over the instant point limit. 2 laps down would be John Pat Kelly and John Atkinson Jr., and your 2 retirees from the race being Kent Nielsen and the lowest rated iRacing driver in the field. Opening lap dramas for Michael Weischerek then would ultimately mean that his suspension would only last 1 corner out there. From the observatory then, you take a look around this place and you will see that the championship standings, as they look, are just creeping closer and closer, and those 2 passes from Walter Lux, Taylor, they tie the points for 3rd.
Yeah, they certainly do, and it keeps it dramatic into the final handful of races in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour. But I think Byrne and Kammeier are both running fantastic races in slightly separate sort of scenarios. But Byrne snatching that holding on for that P3. Florian Kammeier moving up the field to take the 5th place that he ended up in. and it keeps that fight for third in the championship. Sorry, it was Lux that made his way up. Never mind, Kamaya. To keep that fight for third in the championship absolutely tight as it could be.
Yeah, you see the likes of Emil Bernstorff now consolidate his 6th place in the championship. George van Rensburg will have eyes back over to Alex Hagland, 7th and 8th, with Edward Apariari and Paul O'Regan both not scoring points today, so they will stay 9th and 10th. With no Emil Lundell, they are safe, but Kent Nielsen, a chance that has fallen by the wayside, and Joseph Loke would have wanted to move up into the top 10 with today's run, but 11th, not what the doctor ordered for him. Mario Bodlosh picks up a couple points, and Jeffrey Lawler does not, so he stays in 20th position on 14 championship points. Dennis Branch and Renato Augusto both won't score, but Gerard Burrell will join the host of drivers there on 4 championship points, Taylor. That is a very eclectic mix.
I'm trying to count how many is it, because it goes quite the way down and includes names like William Chadwick, who's of course taking part in the British F4 Esports Championship at the moment. But yeah, we cycle through a lot of drivers who have only scored a single point or nothing as the standings gets deeper and deeper, as we had 2 new debutants tonight who make their way onto the SimSpeed Championship standings. And how many is that we've got on this list now?
A lot. It'll be over 60, and in fact we'll go over 70 now in terms of the list, because we're on to 78 different drivers for this season, with just 5 rounds remaining in the championship. So this has been one where points have been very important to pick up as this season has gone on. And what a race we will have next, because we will just have to wait 7 days for the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez, the brothers Rodriguez, to go into racing action for the first time at the Mexican Grand Prix. And this is something that I think is going to be completely unique to how they are going to race. It's the highest circuit by altitude in iRacing history, and by that metric, these cars are affected on their power output.
And not just that, but the way they generate the downforce as well. Sperry, I think you've completely undersold just how at altitude Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is. Before it was released, the highest altitude circuit on iRacing was somewhere between 700 and 900 meters above sea level. Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is 2,200 meters above sea level. This is the sort of track where, despite the fact it's got that massive long straight, all of the drivers will be coming to this track with every ounce of downforce dropped and thrown at this car to have any amount of grip, because as you go up, air pressure drops, the amount of actual air that's around you goes down, so the amount of downforce that you generate goes down as well. It is such a unique place to go racing, because there is literally no track like it on the calendar, because we'll see Monaco level downforce packages and Monza level top end speed. I think it's going to be a spectacular debut event for this circuit in the iRacing Grand Prix Tour.
And not only that, with 125 points remaining to play for, a championship gap of 66 championship points in mind as they head themselves over to here. It is one that you can only catch with us on SimSpeed TV at the true level of what you've got. Want to give a massive thanks to this team who's brought this show to you, from Dan Yeaman, from Taylor Mills. My name is Jake Sperry. When we say that championships mean everything, we talk about how you close down a gap and you continue to find pace at the right time when you need it. It's back-to-back wins at the Circuit of the Americas. It's back-to-back wins this season. It is now finding form at the crunch time end of the season, and now we're heading to one of the great unknowns, one of the tough circuits now that we'll see in terms of racing. All aboard, because our next stop is Mexico City. Jacob Reed Express is now leaving the station, and Eduardo Radiz, hold on to your hat, because you got to jump on board and hold this championship before the train departs.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.